People call this the Valentine's Day's gift.
So ultimately, it is our government's way of bringing in extra money.
Do you think the 15-month policy is a good policy? It's fantastic, but I also think it's painful. Have you seen this before, Yu Rong?
No, not in the last.
Not in the last 10
Not
years.
in the last
yeah.
10 years.
Because right now rental rates is at its all-time high.
There's a talk among us agents that Mr. Lawrence Wong actually single-handedly just killed off all agents Valentine Day.
Alright, so this is Nuggets on the Go episode 4. And this is going to be the first episode on our brand new Nuggets on the Go YouTube channel. Thank you for following us throughout the years. And why did we decide to have a brand new channel is because we're going to ramp things up quite a fair bit. For 2023, you're going to have one episode every week with us. And we want to thank you for following and subscribing to this brand new channel. So do help us share this content if you find that the content is very useful for you. And for today's episode, you'll notice that somehow, let's zoom out a little bit. We're going to have like so many people here, right? And this is a fresh start to 2023 because we're going to have this like discussion, or we call it the NOTG Banter mode. So we have a couple of our teammates here from our PLB Inside Sales team. And why don't let's introduce the first guest first. Wayne.
Right, my name is Wayne. Nice to meet you.
What do you do, Wayne?
What
What do you do here in Inside Sales
Alright,
team?
so of course we are in the inside sales team, and I'm responsible for all the marketing stuffs of the properties as well as also all the marketing campaigns.
Next, we have George.
Alright, so my name is George, and I've been with PLB for the past 4 years. Felt longer than that. You can see the wrinkles on my face.
Yeah,
Yes,
and also recently we talked a lot about your receding hairline.
Yeah,
Can you share
yeah,
with us
it's
what is
okay.
happening?
So, but in any case, I enjoy what we are doing, and I'm excited to be on this show. We actually paid for an amount to be appearing on this show.
Yeah, episode 1 is on a
Especially,
discount lah.
Yeah.
$25 per entry.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So
Okay, great. And we have Yu Rong as well.
Hello everyone, I'm Yu Rong. I'm the listing and investment consultant in PropertyLimBrothers.
Great. How many years have you been doing real estate?
Doing real estate for the last 10 years, doing portfolio planning for my clients.
Great.
there's a quick fun fact. I actually purchased my house through Yu Rong.
Oh my goodness.
Way back.
When was that?
That was back in 2013.
And who was your representing agent?
Melvin Lim.
Oh my goodness. So the customer is here.
Yeah.
The tagger representing the new launch was here. And this is the buyer's agent.
Yeah, self-cycle myself to join the team. Yeah.
Great. From customer to become a teammate. Awesome. Okay, so for today's episode, we're going to talk about the very hot from the oven news that happened just a couple of days. And of course, that was Budget 2023. And this budget, of course, we're going to focus on the latest, should we call this the cooling measures?
No.
No, I don't think it's cooling measures.
Right, why don't you think it's a cooling measure this round? I mean, if this is considered a cooling measure, it would be like the 14th or 15th round of cooling measures since Lehman Brothers.
Usually, because for a cooling measure, right, it usually slaps everybody throughout, unless it is additional buyer stamp duty, where we actually split into whether your citizenship, number of property counts that you have, right? But for buyer stamp duty, this one is on a tiering basis, right? We are affecting the market differently through different property prices. So this one is more like a wealth tax to redistribute some of the funds. And I also see why this is not a cooling measure because government has been a few things. Number one, nowadays the cooling measures will be released at almost at 12 midnight, so that nobody can react to it.
2359.
Yes, correct, right? So cooling measures are meant to be temporary. This one is not going to be temporary, even though our additional buyer stamp duty started in 2011. It's been 12 years, a very, very long temporary kind of cooling measures, right? Yeah, so not cooling measure, in my opinion.
How about George? What do you think?
I think
This was released at what time? 4 p.m.
yeah, about 4 p.m. People call this the Valentine's Day's gift. Yeah.
And
No, in fact, I think there's a talk among us agents that Mr. Lawrence Wong actually single-handedly just killed off all agents Valentine Day. Because once the news was out, our phone just can't stop ringing, and all of us is just like trying to reach out to our buyers, trying to see whether are they interested to quickly close the sale before the 12 midnight.
Yeah, we had a couple of closings right that night.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the chat group like a lot.
So
of,
maybe some of the businesses are hit lah. Maybe some reservations were being cancelled last minute.
and even if a couple were to go for Valentine's Day dinner that night, the whole topic will all be on the buyer stamp duty.
Yeah, man. Should they buy or shouldn't they buy?
Right, and so this is the buyer stamp duty. Of course, there is this calculation there. So George, what do you think? Do you think this has a huge impact?
I don't think it has a huge impact. I think in my opinion, this is targeted more at the higher quantum property, as it is evident in terms of the numbers and the breakdown. We do have a few clients that are going for those 6 or 8 million or 10 million type properties. When we send all this across to them, in their opinion is that it doesn't really impact them that much. Instead of wanting to make a hasty decision, they feel that they shouldn't be jumping onto the bandwagon and kind of rushing off to have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction and just to buy due to this wealth tax system. Yeah, I think on the other hand, they were saying that okay, it's fine for them. They see this as something that will even moderate the market even better, and they do not mind taking their time to hunt for a property and to go into a property that they want to have more value instead of just rushing into it.
Right, let's have a look at this news. I mean, the next day immediately it says, no rush to close home purchases before stamp duty deadline. Wayne, how do we calculate the latest one? Maybe share a little bit about the latest calculation.
Right. So of course, from the standard buyer stamp duty rate is actually from 3% and 4%, right? So previously we were all looking at this figure of $1 million. So anything that's below $1 million is 3%, and anything that's above $1 million is 4%. So of course, right now there's 2 additional tiered that's being tiered in. So anything between $1 million to $1.5 million is actually 5%, and from $1.5 million to anything that's from $1.5 million to $3 million is 5%, and from $3 million onwards is 6%. So basically, from $1 million to 1.5 is 4%. But actually, on this note, there's actually a very interesting thought: is that we keep talking about buyers, whether are they being influenced by this increase in this buyer stamp duty that actually propels them to whether should they buy or not. But actually, I encountered situations when even the sellers themselves, they may also be thinking whether should I lower my price just to catch this wave, or when I'm actually having an offer on the table, and when in the midst of the negotiation, will this actually affect the seller's decision to actually accept a lower price just to move on, or should they just continue to stick on to their current their existing marketing price? Yeah, because eventually, personally, one of my cases that I had is that the sellers actually mentioned that the increase in the percentage point isn't significant enough for them to actually drop the price, because it's just only a few $1,000s increase. I mean, in the words of the sellers lah.
Yeah, so if you calculate by $4 million, right? The calculation now is 4 million times 6% minus 60,400. So if you compare with the previous round, actually, what is anyone has a calculator? Can we just do a quick calculation based on 4%? Based on $4 million. Actually, the difference is not much, right? It's basically probably about 10 plus 20,000, or is it?
I think more than that, yeah. For 6 million,
Right.
The difference will be about 75,000. Yeah, but of course, when we take a look in terms of the overall quantum,
Right.
Whenever we're looking at, say, for example, a landed, I think the 75,000 delta can be covered back when the overall price quantum increases. So I think, that is not really something that a lot of buyers are concerned about, especially when this wealth tax was being introduced.
So 4 million in the past, it was 144,000. Now, how much is it? 4 billion.
So 4 million in the past,
It's
now
144,000.
is 6%.
179,600.
So basically, it's about 30 over thousand increment. And if let's say we're talking about property quantums in the range of 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, actually the differences are quite minute.
Yep.
Yeah, and just a very interesting point, Wayne point out that have we looked at the seller's point of view, right? I think it also depends on whether are the sellers upgrading or downgrading.
Of course.
Yeah. So if let's say they are moving bigger, I think the mindset is that they will also think that, hey, if I move bigger now, I also need to pay a little bit more in terms of the buyer stamp duty. So why should I lower my price for my existing home? Yeah, we should all, bear so-called like the same kind of weightage lah in terms of that buyer stamp duty. Unless I think if the current sellers, they are actually downgrading, or let's say they are retiring, they want to pay off a singular property that's of a lower quantum, then maybe they might take into that consideration that maybe I should adjust a little bit to suit the buyers, right? So that I can exit soon to fulfill my plan. So I think it really depends on everybody's different thought process,
Right.
and the perspective. Okay, what do you think? Maybe I pose a question to Yu Rong. What do you think on this note? Since just now you mentioned that it's technically not like a cooling measure, right? What do you think will happen to the new launches for this year because of this?
Because of this cooling measure. Okay,
Because of
personally,
this non-cooling measure.
yeah, okay. Because of this buyer stamp duty change, right? Okay.
Right.
So actually, I think like maybe not just new launch specifically. So I wrote down some numbers over here, right? Because the stamp duty affects different tier differently. So of course, anything that is below 1.5 million, right, your HDB flats, high-end HDB flats, like your entry level,
Dawson.
like entry level
Duxton.
quantum kind of pricing below 1.5 million, there's no impact at all, right? So if let's say I'm trying to buy something that's maybe 2.5 million kind of quantum for like a new launch, maybe like a 3-bedroom. The main difference of the stamp duty I'm paying is about $10,000, right? And it is actually 0.4% of my 2.5 million purchase price. So I think like that is quite insignificant, right? But if I were to look at, let's say we jump on to like higher quantum properties, right? 10 million detached, let's say at Bukit Timah, right? The buyer stamp duty difference right now is at $155,000. So it is a good enough additional revenue, definitely, for the government from a revenue standpoint. But if you see it with regards to the perspective of like I'm buying a $10 million house, right? It is only like 1.55% additional. But maybe this could create, right, like a current tug of war between like sellers and buyers when they're trying to offer. Like buyers will try to use this and try to start with a lower offer. And of course, like really depending on what is the plans of the sellers, like what Melvin mentioned, right? Maybe the sellers already have a firm plan, right? They might not want to waste time. They want to move on, right? For sellers who are very, very firm on still being very bullish about the market, then of course, like the negotiation not going to work, lah. Okay, but I think something that's very interesting is more like, let's say for example, GCB $35 million.
Definitely, I think the
right?
impact.
655,000 additional of buyer stamp duty difference.
It seems like a lot, right?
Yeah.
But for GCB buyers,
Yes.
it doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, I don't think it will be. I don't think it will affect any of the GCB transactions. But of course, in the eyes of just 655,000, it looks huge.
But I don't think-
1.87% difference.
Yeah,
actually.
but I don't think the buyer stamp duty will form as a factor of negotiation between the buyer and the seller. Honestly, in that space of a GCB. Yeah, because let's say the GCB is marketing at $23 million. So just because of that 6%, from 4% to 6%.
And anyway, I mean, okay, that 6% is technically an increment of the 4%, right?
Yeah,
So
it's 2% increment.
Yeah.
But the 2% increment, you will not go in and negotiate that. Let's say $23 million properties, I will just go and negotiate in $20 million.
Yeah.
So it is a different scale altogether, I feel, for this kind of like large quantum. So ultimately, it is our government's way of bringing in extra money. Or I wouldn't say extra money, but bringing in money to support the economy, or so that at least that's what they
So it's
say
considered a wealth tax.
Yes, correct.
And that's of course in conjunction with the luxury cars, the ARF thingy. And this time around, of course, if you look at the news, right, the amount of grants that are being dished out for purchases of BTOs as well as resale is actually a lot, right? What do y'all think? I mean, like,
This is a very interesting thing. In fact, internally we are all talking about this because we all know that the public housing market, especially for the resale market, is actually very buoyant. I mean, it's very bullish right now. Pricing is actually at all-time high and is still continuing to increase, right?
right.
And now with additional grants given to the buyers, which they can utilize for the resale market,
Yep.
sellers will be thinking that actually now I got more money from the buyers, then my price will just will be even more sticky and will be even more higher, right? Wouldn't it propel the resale market to go up even higher in terms of pricing? Because right now, I can go up to $180,000 of grant based on the lowest tier of income, right? Which is actually quite a significant increase. Yeah, so I'm not too sure exactly will this be a double-edged sword
Right.
for the HDB resale transactions.
George, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for the 4-room, right, I think that will be what we call the FMCG or the fast-moving consumer goods, lah. Especially
Okay.
when the grant have increased from 50,000 to 80,000. So that's quite a huge chunk, and I think a lot of first-timer. I think over the past few seasons we have seen a lot of first-timers. They are buying into the resale market because of the huge grants that they can actually leverage on. And furthermore, right now with this, additional 30K, I do agree with what Wayne says. Is that most of the sellers, what they will do now is they might use this chance to try to push out the price. But ultimately, I think eventually, right, the price will still be affected by this factor called the COV. So if let's say the COV is too high, then I believe whenever there's a lot of transactions, buyers will be aware on the valuation. They might easily go for other options. So the COV will still be the component that I think will curb the kind of prices that will go off spiral.
Prevent the price from running away, in a way.
Actually, this is very concerning. If you look at the chart here, 2020 until 2022, this is just for resale HDB transacted by quarter. Of course, volume for HDB is always very buoyant because this is like the bread and butter, right? Evergreen. And then, of course, the entire Singapore island is populated with about 1.1 to 1.2 million. And of course, HDB's apartments are a kickstart journey for all Singaporeans. So I think the concerning point is that if you look at just in the last 12 quarters, the acceleration is actually quite fast in terms of the price PSF. And let's have a look at this. Yeah. If you look at this graph, it was from like the low $400s per square foot all the way to now averagely about $550 per square foot. It seems to be still picking up speed. And of course, with the announcement of 100 to 150 BTO projects, that is for the BTO portion. But if you look at the resale portion, I think what our government wanted to do is that this to also let Singaporeans know that they will be here to support you for your first home journey, and they will help you with the down payment. In fact, now with the grant, technically speaking, you don't need any savings in your CPF because that amount is instantly credited into your CPF.
Exactly.
Instantly use it for down payment, right? So you can immediately get a home. How much is the average COV now?
I think what we are seeing on the ground is I think like city fringe area, you can still have a COV of about $30,000 to $50,000. I think that is quite the norm, especially
Depending on
towards
flat type, right?
areas like depending on flat type. Like 4 rooms, I think in Tiong Bahru area, that is I think still something that we are seeing right now. Punggol areas, I think unless your unit is those kind of like top floor corner unit, maybe you can still have a COV of about 20,000, and I think that is still quite normal. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Actually, that's very strange because I still remember last time in 2010, what happened was that because of the very rampant COV, it was like 50 to 100,000. And of course, HDB came up with a very innovative approach, which is to remove the valuation report.
Right.
Yeah. So in the past, when we show HDB homes, we have to first apply a valuation report, put it on the table. Every buyer will come in, they will ask for the valuation report.
Yep.
And then on top of that, the seller will ask for a COV. But after HDB eradicated that approach, actually it was fantastic. It was very effective. You cannot do a valuation now.
Yep.
You cannot have a valuation report. It's like a guesswork. You can only look at the transaction. But somehow, after the pandemic, the COV surfaced back.
Yep.
Yeah. Why do you think that happened? Yu Rong, what do you think?
I mean, this is basically demand and supply. So, I mean, going back to the history of 2013, where we remove the valuation, is to take away the COV component, right? Because actually, at that point of time, there was like low supply, right? So, everybody has to go to the resale market. And what happens is that, like, when you have a valuation report upfront given to the sellers, right? And their expectation, okay, so how much more cash can I actually like ask for? Right? That's why if COV increase rate, eventually the valuation will catch up. But the expectation, my neighbor actually previously sold X amount of COV, I want to add on, right? So that is a perpetually, like vicious cycle, right? And that's why when the government implemented that, I remember from a on the ground knee-jerk reaction at that point was like, from positive COV, and then the next half a year, right, it just switch over to like negative COV.
Yeah, everybody's
Because
talking about how much lower can you sell me?
yeah,
Right.
because sellers who don't really need to sell, right, they actually maybe give it a pause, and they're only left with like sellers that really need to sell, and buyers also want to see a knee-jerk reaction, right, and then they hold off, right, and only like so like the buyers that really need to buy, right, they use it as an opportunity to actually like get a better deal. And then eventually what we saw is with all these measures like supply, changing of valuation, changing of like the loan to value, HDB price eventually came down and was like a flat line all the way until pre-COVID, right? So actually HDB,
Correct.
you don't you not the owners never make any money if you enter in like 2011, 2012, right?
Yeah.
But of course, COVID, what happens is that like basically BTO construction, all this is being delayed.
Yep.
Right. So what happens is that it brings a lot of people right back into the resale market, and then demand went up dramatically. And I think because of like viewing restrictions and things like that, right? There is this what
This
I call
hype,
like you have this
A
like
bit of
hype.
FOMO effect.
Yeah, you can't view the house, right?
Yeah.
And then you know that when you see a house really, if you like it, you have to offer, and then the COV start to spike up, right? Yeah. But eventually, I think like right now we are quite normalized really in terms of like COV value.
Yeah.
My
And
personal thought, I think, is more probably it's also the change of the lifestyle of buyers. So I think we all know that when private property owners, when they downsize to a HDB, they have the cash,
Yeah.
right? And then they decided to, I sell off my private and then I want to downsize the HDB. It could be reasons like, let's say for example, my kids have like moved out. But I think the deeper reasons, it may be that probably during the COVID period when they are all within the same household, they realize that actually it became a
Friction.
friction. It can be like a burden on the interpersonal relationship. The children maybe moved out of their house, and then when they moved out and get their own house, and then the parents are left with a huge property, and they felt that there's no need for me to maintain such a huge property, sell it off, and I also want to downsize as well to a private to a HDB, and that's where all the extra money comes in, which I can then pay for the COV that the sellers is asking for, and that probably drive up the market. Yeah, because it cannot be suddenly out of a sudden during the COVID period, everybody just want to downsize the private property or they sell it off. And it may also become, I think it's all interrelated in the sense that maybe also during that period of time, people also want to buy a bigger property. And that drives up the price for private property. And these people with this huge place, they realize that actually it's the right time to cash out. And then I decided to cash out. So it's like a circle it's a cycle altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Adding on to that I think during that season and even until now, I think there's a lot of people that will like to so-called give up their BTO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they give up a BTO because they cannot wait anymore. Just for example, I mean, I have friends like who told me that even their their Punggol project, they waited for about 6 years. Yeah, and because of COVID, everything was on halt. Construction was halted. I mean, 6 years plus another 5 years is 11 years of a journey. And of course, in economics term, there's this thing called the time preference. So when we talk about time preference, it means that time is the only thing that you cannot buy back. It's not considered a commodity. It's basically an op cost. So 11 years of a life is actually a very long time. And plus the fact that actually if we look at the total setup of housing inventory in Singapore, we always talk about that a lot, right? Like 1.1 million to 1.2 million of HDB apartments, 340,000 of condo apartments, and of course 73,000 landed. I think one more thing adding to Wayne's point on the HDB and COV and all that kind of stuff is because when private property runs up too fast, the HDB apartments, because of the fact that a lot of people have this aspiration as well to move on to private property for a certain category of HDB upgraders. When they find that run is fast, they also expect their HDB to sell more, right? Because they need more funding to cash out and then to down pay into the private property. So there's a lot of vicious cycles. Just have a look at this chart. This was from Q3 2022 to Q4, just in one quarter. Just have a look at the PSF change in one quarter, and this is like still happening last year. And of course, if you look at that, I think that is one of the core reasons why government has to take action. And within that short span of 2020 to now, how many rounds of implementation do we have in the HDB market? I mean, we have like PLH, prime housing. We have
Change of LTV.
LTV.
Yep.
Do you had a change of MSR as well?
We didn't change the MSR, but we increased the
Stress
base
test.
rate, the stress test for
Stress test.
HDB loan.
Right.
Yep.
And then HDB loan now dropped to like 85%.
80%.
80%, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then what else do we have?
We have a lot of introduction of all these, grants that came in, right, to really help the first timers, and also like a lot more ramping up to try to, cut down the building time back to the norm by, I think, in the next 2 years.
Right.
So actually all this, I think, is expected to actually taper down eventually the resale growth rate for the HDB segment. Because going back to just now we talked about, how come there was a huge run in terms of pricing, right? 2021 was 12.7% up for HDB. 2022 was 10.3% up. And actually we just look at volume on transaction, it tells us the story. It will tell us the story, right? So in 2017 to 2019 for the HDB segment, average volume of transaction on a yearly basis about 22,000 to 23,000 units. Okay, and actually in 2020, right, even with the circuit breaker, right, you remember I was quite happy during the circuit breaker.
Why are we happy?
I was like, can take a
Only
break.
can rest.
Do you manage to take a break?
Not really. Everything went online, right? So, but I guess I was able to have lesser in-person interaction, right? So even with circuit breaker where Q2 reduce the number of units that are being sold, right? Because you can only do virtual viewing. So there's only 3,426 units done in Q2 2020. But the year ended with 24,700 units that are being transacted, right, which is already higher than the norms. But 2021, it just went crazy. 31,000 units.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
I think that justifies, right? Because so much more demand came in. And that's why more people competing, price have to go up.
Right. So this article also talks about the point that Wayne brought up. The increased grant could raise HDB resale prices. I mean, okay, maybe let us come from a first principles approach. What can help to curb the rise in HDB resale pricing? I mean, let's just imagine if you're a policymaker, what do you think you will do, George? I mean, okay, when it comes to, of course, policies, I think firstly, our government has been doing a great job. And if we come from a first principles approach, we'll also talk about this in my 777 sharing session, right?
Right.
That a lot of it has to be because of the fact that we are now in a monetary system that whenever central banks print money, introduction of quantitative easing, the entire money supply just get flooded. Everything flows in a circulating portion into bond, stock market, and then it goes into hard assets like real estate. And of course, a lot of liquidity will flow into Asia, into Singapore as well. And of course, that will drive everything up. So just to give a contextual example is that when more money is being printed, more supply is printed, we can feel it through inflation. We can feel it through, of course, swelling of a lot of our maybe stocks and bonds and stuff like that. And because of that, we want flight to safety. We want to remove some of the gains that were made, some of the paper gains, and then we want to pump it into harder assets like real estate so that we can preserve it. But by doing the action, the asset prices get inflated. And of course, on all spectrum, landed, condo, HDB gets inflated, right? I think the state that we're in right now with 13 to 14 round of cooling measure, I don't think we can go back. Because the moment we remove any cooling measures, our asset price will get inflated even more. So
Correct.
I think we are stuck already. So I think we are stuck in the sense that we have to sort of live with all these cooling measures
Or rather, this is a norm lah. The
for
new
a very
norm
long
lah.
time. Yeah, we just have to get used to it. There's no way our government can remove it. Okay, so now, if you were to be a policymaker, how will you come from a demand or supply angle to make HDB resale prices maybe go up slightly gradually? I mean, not and how, what can we do to remove COV? Because COV is one of the thing that is stopping our next generation from buying, because cash is a hurdle, right? Yeah. So yeah.
I think firstly, I believe that
Mr.
property
George Ping, yeah.
prices
Mr.
should
Ping.
property prices should gradually go up,
Right.
and it cannot remain stagnant as with our country's GDP as well. So but it must be in line and in check with against Singapore GDP, right? If it starts to escalate beyond Singapore GDP, then I think that is something that is worrying, because we will then start to think of the next generation whether they can afford a house even, which is what is experiencing in some of the other countries where the younger generation, they are not able to afford, they can only rent. Yeah. So I think it's extremely tough to have a policy to say that how can we keep prices affordable, and I think government is doing a great job. If we increase the down payment by a lot, first timer will suffer. And I think the best way is to keep in check the supply and demand. And I think the policy to be made should remain flexible. For example, right now there is this 15 months cooling measure that was put in place to prevent the private property owners to buy into the HDB. In time to come, and that is also the reason why there's a lot of $1 million HDB, because they sell their flat, they have the money to just pay off everything. So if let's say, come to a point where there isn't a lot of demand, and to prevent the prices from dropping, then perhaps they could think of, I want to remove the 15 months now, and then to start to stabilize the market. But I think overall, it is still a matter of supply and demand, and whether can they be flexible to tweak the policy such that they keep the price in check.
Do you think the 15-month policy is a good policy? I personally think it's a very painful thing.
Fantastic policy.
It's fantastic, but I also think it's painful. Because there will be a class of families that will have so much pain. For example, there will be a class of family that is below 55 years old.
Yeah.
And they really just want to shrink and not have such a huge burden anymore on the private property, right? But they can't do that. They have to go and rent for.
Yeah, I think that's a very. I think I totally agree with Melvin, because let's say, for example, the 15 months window is actually to curb people from going into a HDB with the cash that you have from a private property, right? And then to then inflate the price in a way. But what about families that are being impacted by this whole entire maybe I work in the tech industry and I got laid off, and I have to move off from my private property. I can't service the mortgage and stuff like that. And then now when I sell it off, and I still got to go and pay a rent that is so high right now.
Yeah.
So it becomes a double whammy for me in a way. So it's like I sell it off because I cannot service the loan, and yet now I got to pay a very high monthly mortgage a monthly rental. So I think
how much is the rental of a Punggol HDB forum now? Is oh my goodness.
I think it's about
3,800 to
3,000 plus.
A 4-room
plus.
HDB in Punggol that's not near to MRT is $4,000.
Yeah. I think it was.
Have you seen this before, Yu Rong?
No, not in the last.
Not in the last 10
not
years.
in the last 10 years.
Because right now rental rates is at its all-time high, and it affects cash flow. And when we talk about cash flow, I think it affects your livelihood, it affects your daily lifestyle as well. And I think that's what a lot of people. I think that's extremely painful, especially for clients or buyers or sellers that are trapped in that kind of situation.
Right. Okay, from a macro perspective.
But I think by removing these 15 months right now, coupled with these additional grants,
It's too early.
It's too early.
I think it's gonna be crazy.
Okay, why do you think it's a fantastic policy?
Okay, personally, basically, right, I think the government is doing a very, very good job already, right, to try to stabilize HDB prices to make it more affordable in the generations to come. And the only way is to actually give more supply. And that's what they're really doing, right? The only reason is more like why price went up so fast is really more like a
Supply thing.
unexpected event. Like nobody expected COVID. Nobody expected COVID to last so long, impact so many industries. People stop work, China lockdown and all that. Delay the entire construction process. And that's why we saw a demand and supply, more like a demand change in the HDB market. Right. So generally I would say that right now, government is trying to do a catch up to fulfill and deliver whatever orders that they have. And once we come back to the normalcy of BTOs being able to collect on time, definitely we will see people are more okay to wait for the general 3 years, 3.5 years for a BTO. The resale market demand will reduce further and price will stabilize. And I think it's good that HDB prices still go up, keep pace with inflation, help our Singaporeans preserve asset, right? Because over the last since 2013 until 2020, 7 years, right? Actually, it's going down and stagnant, right? And then I will if I'm a HDB owner, I will feel that my asset is decreasing. Yeah. And that's not too good as well.
And that season also there was this new realization that your HDB will go to zero. Still remember all the debate on news? Yeah. And I think now it's in a brand new and different season. How about George? What do you think about a 15 months policy?
I think it's painful, but I think HDB is also flexible in terms of exercising certain appeals. as long as they can show sufficient proof. And I think there's also quite a healthy cases where appeals are successful and buyers can still go ahead to purchase. So I think it's not all too bad, but it is still necessary to curb prices in check. And I think there's a lot of flexibility that's being exercised.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. And when do you think the HDB prices will stabilize? Final question.
Final question.
With all this in check, personally, I don't think in the next 12 to 24 months it might happen. I think probably
What's the
3 years.
definition of like a stabilized?
Yeah,
a
stabilize in
stable
terms
growth?
of we don't get to hear like a very high amount of COV or in the sense that in terms of percentage growth is in
Less
a
than a
healthier
certain percentage.
healthier fashion. Yeah. When do you think it will stabilize?
Actually, I think in terms of like COV value.
Okay, and do you think there will be an oversupply? I mean, when all the 100 to 150 BTO projects, when they MOP
Yes.
Yeah.
and all these are going to be completed by which year? 2020.
2024, 2025, some of them that are delayed.
And you add another 5 years,
Yeah.
probably in like 2030,
Mm.
you're going to have a huge amount of
A huge wave of
quantity
supply.
of BTO that hits the MOP stage. So do you think there might be an oversupply?
Okay, so many questions, right?
and all this will affect the prices, right? Yeah, because I agree with you. We
Yeah, the nuggets are here.
we have to ensure that we can bring the nuggets in. We have to ensure that so what we're going to do is that we're going to have nuggets to announce that the episode is ending. Yeah, because this nuggets on the go.
And it's
And of
not
course,
sponsored.
It's not sponsored by McDonald's lah, but we all love McDonald's. Yeah, since young. McDonald's is the best marketing company ever, right? Because
They
even
are
my
real
kids love
estate
Mac. I don't know why. Like
Everybody
everybody.
happy meal. You know, you start off being a happy meal.
Why is it that even my kids, right, when you talk about McDonald's, they have a sense of happiness? Like even for me also. I
You have
don't
a
know why.
toy. Like I mean, like you go for you have like a freebie.
Is this like subliminal marketing from young or stuff like that?
Yeah.
But we
That's
just love
yellow.
McDonald's.
I think the color yellow sparks happiness.
I still love
Sparks
Filet-O-Fish.
joy?
I don't know why.
Yeah, sparks
okay.
joy.
Anyway, okay, all this has implication on, but of course we cannot think too far, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we just need to solve the next 3 to 5 years problem. We also want to make sure that everybody has a chance to purchase their own property. Yeah. So, but when all this property hits MOP next time, what do you think will happen to? Would there be an oversupply that will cause price to stagnate or it will go down? Last question.
Okay. Wow, I think this is like many questions within one question. But I think
Wow.
generally, HDB, I think if it can like continue overall like HDB price index, you know, like at a 3 to 4%, 3 to 5% every year, I think that's a good growth rate.
Right.
And I think like the key idea here for the HDB development board is to make sure that HDB pricings are affordable lah. Right. So I think that is very important. And feel free to.
Somebody just type McDonald's target kids. Yes, they also target adults as well.
Yeah.
Come. Okay, sorry.
Okay. I lose my train of thought. Right. Okay. So generally, where was I?
The percentage point increase 3 to 4%.
But then percentage point increase one thing, right? The other thing will also be in the sense that like HDB's intention is to keep it affordable, right? End of the day is they want to make sure that almost everyone has a home, right? It's not the main point on whether there's enough price increase for like upgrade, but most important thing is there is like a housing need, like a shelter, so that Singaporeans can feel safe, right? So that's one thing. In terms of MOP, you know, like every year we are going to expect like 20 to 25,000 units averagely that were MOP every year, and this is starting from 2019 because we first launched BTO in like 25,000 units, Mr.
Really,
Gogo right, in 2011. And we have continued since lowest is like 17K a year. Every year we're launching units, right? So, of course, we're going to expect for the next 10 years, there will still be about 20 to 25,000 new units to come, right? And I think Singaporeans like new stuff, lah. Definitely, right? So, all these MOP units, I think will still have an
Very
attraction
popular.
point, right? For people who want to stay in a newer HDB, they don't want to have like concerns over they'll outlive the HDB, CPF usage restriction, the rule of 95, loan restriction and all that stuff, right? So I think overall, pricing will still go up for HDB. I hope that with all these measures, it could stabilize to a healthy growth rate by end 2024. I think that is a more
Realistic time frame.
expectation.
I think
Awesome.
while Yu Rong can go and eat the nuggets, right? This is my thoughts and opinion. I think
Okay.
to answer the question of whether will there be oversupply, I think we need to look at a few things. Number one is, will the current owners want to upgrade to a private property? And where will the price point be, right, by 2030 for the private property? If everything remains status quo, that means the TDSR remains status quo, the stress test remains status quo, and then salary of the current homeowners increase gradually such that they can afford a private property. Let's say by then a 3-bedder is 2 over million. And if they can afford, given that the economy has been increasing, then I think there will be a lot of movement. So that's, I think, the very first factor. The second factor is whether will the population still continue to grow, and will there be, for example, new PRs that will come to Singapore and then they want to buy their first like HDB, and whether the grants will still be there for them to leverage that will support the HDB upgraders in line with their income to move to a private property, and whether will there be an oversupply of the private properties as well. So I think all these will then be able to allow us to answer whether will there be an oversupply of the HDBs.
I personally don't think there will be oversupply of private properties, because if you look at the amount of supply, actually now we have a shortage of supply.
Yeah,
For GLS.
correct.
And also in line with the white paper, that's definitely going to happen, I think, by 2030 is 3.5 million Singaporeans, 3.5 million
Yep.
PR plus foreigners, so total 7 million. So,
Yeah.
but I think I mean, whatever policies is in place now is good to solve it. We're also having a very interesting conversation to end off today's episode, right? Last week we talked about in future, who will be the people that can afford private properties if everything goes on like this, right? It is basically, if you look at our TDSR being stagnated now, is now actually getting increasingly difficult to get a loan because of the escalating new launch pricing. So what might happen in future, I mean, one trend that we need to monitor is the existing people that owns private property will be the easier people that can own private properties in future.
Right.
Because it might get increasingly difficult for HDB upgrades to move up to new launches. If all 3 bidders are at least 2 over million, 2.5 million,
Definitely.
it is a very high mortgage for the average Singaporean. And maybe what might happen is that the resale properties that are of a lower quantum might be absorbed at a more rapid speed. Yeah. Then if our wages don't go up in line, then in future we might have like a disparity gap. Right. All right. Any last words, Wayne, before we end the episode?
Think let's keep a lookout for. I mean, we are definitely keeping a lookout in terms of the marketing, in terms of the market movement, especially for these kind of grants and stuff. And definitely we'll be very happy to share with you more in the next session of Nuggets on the Go. Whether will there be any more new movement or any new launches that we may even be talking about new launches in the next session as well, because definitely there's so much that's coming up that actually I can't wait to share with the audience as well.
Let's ask our audience. So do share with us the topic that you would like to see on the next NOTG Banter. Leave your comments down below, and we'll be very happy to explore different topics, and then we can chat about them. We might even be able to compile all your questions, and then we can talk about it in some Q&A segment as well. So meantime, I want to thank you for this first episode with us on NOTG Banter, and we hope to see you on the next one, and do stay tuned on our NOTG YouTube channel. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks.
Wow, it's a very fun session.
Fun?
What?
Very bright. The botak. Oh my goodness.